Hello and welcome. ANOVA, or Analysis of Variance, is a statistical method used to compare the means of 3 or more samples to determine if at least one of the sample means differs statistically from the others. The ANOVA tests for significant differences among group means by analyzing the variance within and between groups. Let's review some key terms related to ANOVA. First, a factor is an independent variable that we are manipulating or observing to see its effect on a dependent variable. In an experiment testing the effect of different fertilizers on plant growth, fertilizer type is the factor. Levels are the different categories or values that a factor can take. The fertilizer factor may have dosage levels such as 0 grams, 2 grams, 4 grams, and 6 grams. The term group is almost interchangeable with level, but there are differences. Specifically, groups are the different categories or values that a factor can take. For example, the fertilizer factor might have 3 groups, including organic fertilizer, chemical fertilizer, and no fertilizer. The response is the dependent variable that we are measuring, and that is affected by the factor. In a plant growth experiment, plant height would be a response variable. In order to conduct an ANOVA, it's important to study and be familiar with 5 key statistical concepts. These are the F-statistic, R squared and adjusted R squared, the multiple comparisons problem and post-hoc tests, residuals, and main effects and interactions. There are 2 types of ANOVA tests, the single factor, or one-way ANOVA, and the two-factor, or two-way ANOVA. We use the one-way or single-factor ANOVA when there's one independent variable with 3 or more levels or groups and one dependent variable. There are 9 steps to conducting one-way or single-factor ANOVA, and if necessary, a 10th step. These are to formulate a hypothesis, collect data, calculate group means and overall mean, calculate degrees of freedom, calculate the sum of squares, calculate mean squares, calculate the F-statistic, and determine the significance of our findings. After the main ANOVA steps, we check our assumptions related to residuals. If we find significant differences, we proceed to the 10th step and conduct post-hoc tests to identify which specific groups differ. We use the two-way or two-factor ANOVA when there are 2 independent variables. There are 10 steps to conducting an ANOVA, and if necessary, an 11th step. These are to formulate the null and alternative hypotheses for each independent variable and their interaction, calculate the means for each combination of levels of the 2 factors, and for each factor and their interaction, we calculate the degrees of freedom, sum of squares, and the mean squares, and the F-statistics. Then we determine whether the factors and their interactions significantly affect the dependent variable. If so, we proceed to interaction analysis to explore how the levels of one factor affect the levels of another. Finally, we can conduct a post-hoc test if necessary to explore differences between specific groups or combinations of factors. When conducting an ANOVA, the data must meet 3 assumptions. First, the data must be random and independent. We check this with the residuals versus order graph, and here the data points seem to be randomly distributed. The second assumption is that the populations are normally distributed. We check this with the normal probability plot and histogram, as in this example, where the red data points fall close to the blue line and the histogram is symmetric about the mean. The third assumption is that the residuals have equal variance across groups or levels. Here we see an example where variances appear to be evenly distributed. Meeting these criteria for our population data helps ensure that our statistical analysis is useful and accurate. As we can see, ANOVA provides a framework for understanding how various factors and their interactions affect a response variable. This makes it a valuable tool in fields such as research, designed experiments, medicine, business data analytics, and process improvement. That wraps up our review of ANOVA, or Analysis of Variance. We'll see you soon.